One day on, there is plenty of fallout and plenty more to say about the Albanese Labor government's morally repugnant and diplomatically reckless decision to recognise the non-existent state of Palestine. This is a monumental shift for the nation. It is actually much broader than just the Middle East issue, as important as that is. But this decision goes to the shape of our crucial alliance with the US and where Australia stands on the global stage. To this point, Australia has been a significant player in global affairs, known for our backbone, our values, and our steadfast adherence to logic and consistency rather than political fashion and opportunism. No longer. By abandoning Israel and the US on the issue of Palestinian statehood, Australia is turning its back on two liberal democracies with the most at stake and with the most knowledge of the complexities of this issue, the ones with skin in the game. Instead, we're throwing our lot in with the weak, virtue-signalling leaders of serious countries like the UK, France and Canada, but also with a bunch of tin pot nations, dictatorships, Islamist regimes and communist countries. When the UN vote is held next month, Australia will break ranks with Israel and our great ally the US and vote instead with countries like Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Zimbabwe, Burkina Faso, Eritrea, Pakistan, Sierra Leone, Senegal, Lebanon, Lesotho, Myanmar, Mongolia, Russia, Cuba, North Korea and China. Good one, Albo. And you know what this theatre of moral cowardice will achieve at the United Nations, don't you? Yeah, absolutely nothing. Without Security Council approval, the vote will be meaningless, and the US will veto this in the Security Council. Think about that, by the way. Only one of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council will stand by Israel. And you wonder why Israel has to defend itself so strongly. Let me walk you through the idiocies and inconsistencies of what's being said, because believe me, you won't get much of it in the rest of the media. What the ABC and the rest of the Green Left media give you, and most of what comes out of the Canberra Press Gallery, is not only pro-Labor, pro-UN and pro-Palestine, it's also hopelessly ill-informed and naive. Our Prime Minister simply has no idea. Listen to this.
But what people in Gaza want clearly is for peace to come out. And when people have clearly uprisen against Hamas, Hamas needs to be isolated. Hamas needs to be disarmed.
Hamas needs to be disarmed. Yeah. But who's doing that now? Israel. Israel is the only country disarming Hamas now with US support. It's sacrificing soldiers by tackling its enemies while trying to avoid civilians. But Albanese wants Israel to stop, which would leave Hamas in charge. And then, magically apparently, Hamas would be disarmed. He's clueless.
Hamas wants to destroy Israel, which is why Hamas can have no role whatsoever in a future Palestinian state. This is about isolating Hamas.
No, it's about appeasing Hamas and isolating Israel. The only entity being isolated by this move is the liberal democratic nation of Israel. This isn't a plan, it's a gesture, a stunt, and it simply doesn't stack up. Listen to this response about how to disarm Hamas.
We have to work to take power from Hamas, take decisions out of Hamas's hands. How do we best do that? Well, we best do that by working with others, such as the Arab League, the Palestinian Authority, who have made clear that they want Hamas to relinquish control.
Oh, really? The Arab League and the Palestinian Authority, the remnants of the Palestinian Liberation Organisation, they'll ask Hamas to disarm and it will just happen? What about Iran? Iran has funded, armed and effectively directed Hamas, but neither Wong nor Albanese even mentions them. They're not part of the Arab League. They're mortal enemies to most of those nations. Without cutting off Iranian money and supplies, Hamas can't be disarmed. Because as Albanese and Wong both recognise now, Hamas doesn't want a two-state solution.
Hamas don't support two states. They support one state, in their own words, from the river to the sea.
Yeah, finally he admits that that horrible slogan, so often seen and heard on our streets, is not a peaceful protest, but a call for the obliteration of Israel. I could have sworn they've been pretending otherwise for almost 2 years. But just to demonstrate how out of his depth Albanese is, let me show you his uncertainty. Remember how protesters have been exposed many times for not knowing what river or which sea they're chanting about?
Can you tell me which river and which sea we're talking about here? You've caught me on the spot.
Tell me which river, which sea.
I don't know geography, man.
Well, watch Albanese as he catches himself and struggles with the geography.
Hamas don't support two states. They support one state, in their own words, from the river to the sea, from the Jordan River to the ocean.
No, mate, not the ocean. Remember, it's river to the sea, you know, the Mediterranean. That's our PM. All gesture, no practical knowledge. Yet Albo reckons he knows more about this war and how to deliver aid while minimising civilian deaths than the Israeli Prime Minister.
I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu. He again reiterated to me what he has said publicly as well, which is to be in denial about the consequences that are occurring for innocent people.
In denial. This from a Prime Minister who hasn't even watched the footage of what happened on October the 7th. So he doesn't even understand Hamas and the atrocities that deliberately triggered this war. And he says Netanyahu's in denial. As for the humanitarian situation in Gaza, where Hamas has stolen, stockpiled and profited from UN aid, let's hear from Netanyahu himself.
So Hamas created this problem, and it was directed against us immediately. We have a starvation policy, which is completely false, any more than we have a genocide policy, which is equally false. We don't. Not this, not that. I don't know of a country that texts millions of messages to civilians to get out of harm's way, giving up the element of surprise or calling them individually on cell phones, yet Israel is accused of genocide. It's absurd. Or starvation policy. But there was a problem of deprivation, no question about it. And so we had to solve it. And the way we solve it is the way I described it to you. And there are now not zero trucks, but at least in, I think last time I checked, hundreds of trucks that went into Gaza. That's alleviating the situation. Now we want to increase the number of distribution sites.
He doesn't seem to be in denial to me. He seems to be actually dealing with a situation. Meanwhile, Albanese prefers emotive reactions to staged propaganda photos that publicly, by his own admission, have driven him to this new stance. Let me show you what ABC TV News broadcast last night to encapsulate the Israeli attitude to all this.
To have European countries and Australia march into that rabbit hole, it's actually shameful.
Yeah, that's all they showed of Netanyahu. That's pretty short, isn't it? And pretty thin. Now, we all know the time pressures of television news, but given how much time the ABC spends on this issue, running Hamas propaganda and demonising Israel, the Israeli Prime Minister might have warranted a little bit more than that. I mean, isn't the ABC supposed to give taxpayers comprehensive and fair coverage? So let me ask you to spend a couple of minutes listening to Benjamin Netanyahu explaining all this from an Israeli perspective.
Well, the prevailing assumption in this is that the problem that we have with the Palestinians is the absence of a Palestinian state. And if they were given a Palestinian state, they would stop the efforts to destroy the Jewish state. But the Palestinians were offered a state many times, including in the partition resolution, and they turned it down. They were offered statehood by my predecessors with lavish concessions. They turned it down. Because the Palestinians are not about creating a state, they're about destroying a state. That's why they opposed the Jewish national movement to create a state called Zionism. They opposed it before the inception of the Jewish state, and they've opposed it since. They've opposed it when they had the Judean Samaria, the West Bank, and Gaza in their hold. They didn't say, let's create a state there. They didn't say that. Because again, their goal is the destruction of a state. Hamas in Gaza had a de facto state. It had a state. And it used it to launch a war of terror against Israel, because their doctrine is that the destruction of Israel should proceed with forceful and direct military and terrorist moves. That's what they did on October 7th. And that's what they'll do again if we don't destroy them. The real reason that this conflict persists is not because of the absence of a Palestinian state, but the persistent Palestinian refusal to recognize a Jewish state in any boundary. Okay? Now, when you give them a Palestinian state, when they haven't abandoned the goal of destroying the Jewish state, all you're doing is you're bringing the next war closer. To have European countries and Australia march into that rabbit hole, just like that, fall right into it, and buy this canard is disappointing, and I think it's actually shameful. But it's not going to change our position. Again, we will not commit national suicide to get a good op-ed for 2 minutes.
Yeah, how can you expose your country and its citizens to the deadly threat of people who want to destroy it just for a few minutes of favourable media coverage? Yet back here in Australia, the moral superiority is palpable.
What happens if those conditions are not met? Will you still recognise Palestine in September?
What we have said is that we will recognise Palestine in September. We've also said that that recognition is based on the commitments we have from the Palestinian Authority and which have been made publicly.
You heard right, they'll recognise a Palestinian state even if no commitments are met. Wong and Albo call them commitments, but they're nothing of the sort. There is no obligation on the Palestinians to disarm or stop paying terrorists or even to hold the elections that they've been promising for 20 years already. If Wong is so confident that this will not turn into just another Islamist extremist badland like Gaza, where women have zero rights and non-believers and gays are thrown from rooftops, then perhaps she should volunteer to be our first ambassador to the state of Palestine. I doubt it. And for all this, as is the way when dealing with radical activists, even after this reckless stand to placate the protesters, the Albanese government has failed to satisfy them.
Recognition is completely meaningless while Australia continues to trade, to supply arms, to have diplomatic relations and to diplomatically protect and encourage other states to normalise with this very state that is committing these atrocities.
Even in Australia, some pro-Palestinians don't want Israel recognised. But Albo and Wong reckon that in the Palestinian territories, their leaders are ready to recognise Israel's right to exist, disarm themselves and guarantee peace and security. To call this naive is a massive understatement. It is recklessly ignorant, deliberately obtuse, and it is selling any prospect of peace or security down the drain. What a position for a once strong nation like Australia to take. This is an abandonment of Israel and of the hostages. And by the way, it abandons all the Palestinian people of Gaza who are left to keep suffering under the murderous Hamas warmongers. What a tragedy for Australia's once strong reputation. Perhaps Just perhaps this will be Albo's troops home by Christmas moment, the time when voters realise the dangerously erratic traits of Mark Latham. This could be the policy move that shows voters how shallow Albanese is and what a bunch of dud tryhards they've elected.